Hey, welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Ryan, and today we're going to go over Piety and Renown in the Dungeon Master's Guide, starting at page 22 of the DMG. And who else am I joined by?
Dave.
Ted.
Nate.
All right, so these are two systems here for being able to score, well, to basically keep scores for how well known your character is throughout your realm.
Within factions, organizations.
Different factions. It's kind of alludes to the idea of tracking that for each individual organization and like this and that.
They're kind of the same system, really. I don't even see Piety as being a subsection. It's just that basically Renown tracks you within the realm or within organizations, and Piety is the gods that are keeping track of you, and you're scoring with them.
Right. Well, I mean, between the two. So Renown is like noble courts and different organizations, knight orders, thieves guilds, this and that. Basically, you should probably use, if you're doing a very court-centric game, use something like Renown. If you're doing a thing where the gods are going to be a major faction, say like a Greco-Roman sort of thing, then you want to track Piety. Yeah.
Well, you know, when I was reading the Piety section, I know we're going the last backwards here, but whatever. When I was reading the Piety section, the first thing that jumped to my mind was the old Hercules.
Clash of Titans?
No, Hercules and Xena shows with Kevin Sorbo and Lucy Lawless, because it was pretty much kind of like that.
Yeah.
Except for they always would have had the negative scores going because they're always like, bucking the gods and doing their own thing and working for humanity.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And well, I mean, so it depends on, with each one, it depends on what that god's agenda would be. Like, does the god want civilization to thrive? And also, like, it's picking your patron deity and seeing if what you're doing is very much in line with what they want. So absolutely, if you're going to do this, your clerics and your paladins should, see if they can really play up to what it is their god wants. And everybody else, like, well, you could either be a participant in this whole thing, willing or not. So.
Well, I almost feel like it becomes more important if you're not religious, or if you're not a divine character, because I feel like it actually gives you a way to interact with the gods and the gods' agenda. It makes religion in the game far more important to you.
Right. If you want to make that an important aspect of your game, Piety is a good way to include that.
I agree.
Otherwise, I mean, because let's face it, clerics and paladins, just by their nature, are based off of a religion or ideal or a deity, where other characters can like go, and it doesn't matter. But now there's a way to track it. There's a mechanic and a score. So now all of a sudden those players are like, may want to make that integral to their build and how they interact with the world around them. And not only that, though, they also make suggestions for rewards on how to get characters with high piety to actually have benefits in the game.
And you can always too, if they do something to appease the god, like throw an inspiration as a little like low level token.
Yeah, you could do that. They talk about using Thor is happy with you today, and you hear a loud boom of thunder, and boom, you have a bless spell on you for however long. Which is there's an alternate rewards section in the DMG on page
227.
227
with lots of cool stuff in it.
Yeah,
I mean, a lot of it is for like higher level. Like, I think, isn't that some of that stuff they're like recommending for like characters of 20th level plus? Like, there's those really high level rewards, the boons.
Well, yeah,
but
some
then
of those are
you can
like
give
getting
a
land granted to you by a noble or a king or something, as well as in that section, I believe.
So that's Piety, but now Renown, which is kind of Piety, has kind of has sprung from, is the main part of that optional rule, and that applies to I feel like the way they're describing it is more so factions and organizations.
Yeah. So something like a Planescape, like if you're playing Planescape with factions, because it's all faction politics, like your character is going to be super highly invested in his faction, and so you might want to keep score in that kind of game.
Or if you're running a thief game, right, and everyone in the party's a thief, and they belong to a thieves guild, Renown would be a great way to track how well they're scoring within the guild itself.
Yeah, one-upping somebody on a heist that you didn't do.
Yeah,
But everybody knows you did it.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, political intrigue and noble courts. Again, renown would be great for that as well.
Yeah. See, the only thing is, I get into the problem of, like, so Planescape, everyone's got the one faction that they really care about. The Thieves Guild, everybody's part of that same faction. My problem is the idea, because it's basically saying keeping renown scores for separate organizations. I'm like, F that. That's a lot of work. That is an awful lot of work. Like, oh, I have the Thieves Guild here. I have the King's Court here. I have the City Guard here. And, like, you know, like, it's all these different tallies, all this gamification of crap. No, I think you should just have regional, like, a renown score that affects you in a region, and in every region stretching out beyond that, you, like, penalize it. Almost like, think of it like, you know,
So you're talking more like fame.
right. Fame, infamy, because if they're counter to what you're trying to do, they're the opposite. But so it's like, you know, time zones in different places. Like, where, like, so it's like, you know, it's 4 o'clock here, it's 3 o'clock there. Give them, like, a -5 penalty and then -10, so on and so on. The further they get from, like, the base of power where they're most known.
So for someone who wants to incorporate this into their game, and they don't want to have a separate score for every single organization and faction, you know, in the game, but, you know, an overall score. So if you actually belong to organizations, then that score is going to be relevant to them.
Right.
You know, but say you outside of that organization, say it's a Thieves Guild, and, well, what does that score mean to other Thieves Guild?
Right.
Well, you flipped. It has an adverse effect. Like, they want to take you out. You're or the police, you know, the watch. You're number one on their most wanted.
Right.
So there is definitely other ways to handle that. Or if you're a renowned spy for your kingdom.
Right. I would only use that metric, you know, like one metric, and it's like, all right, if they're for you, this is good. If they're against you, this is going to be really bad. They might eventually just want to take you out.
And you know, there might just be modifiers that you come up with as the GM, so that, you know, like, oh, this is the general populace. This is within the score counts for within the organization. The score, it counts as an adverse number, you know, from the rival organizations.
Yeah.
You know, it's things like that where you can, at a glance, you can just look at it and gauge what it means. For someone who doesn't want to go, I'm going to break down this thing for every single faction, all 50 of them.
I think I would say, instead of doing just the whole regional thing or the bean counting of like 20 or 30 organizations, I say do it for, like, what's important. Make what's important to your game important to your players by saying, you know, well, you're gaining this benefit from this group, or they're giving you discounts. You know, you notice somebody just bought a sword for this price from this particular blacksmith, and he's a guild blacksmith with the guild you just helped out. So he recognizes you, or he's heard stories about you and your companions, so he's automatically just giving you a deal. And maybe that's part of your benefit from renowned. Well, keeping track of that kind of for the organizations that matter. So if you have 3 organizations in your city, well, it's just 3, you know.
Well, yeah, okay, but
like,
what's to stop your players, like, your players are like, oh, well, I'm getting this thing for this one. So you have 3 that are, what if I try to build this for this organization over here and this one here? So, you, like, the game has now become, to get in the good graces, like, it's great for role-playing and stuff, but now your players are doing all these things that are making you have tracking sheets for, like, 12 different organizations.
See, except that doesn't really... You just stop that immediately.
If you've just incentivized something to happen, you've created a reward system to do it.
When are you going to do it? That's what I mean. So you have 4 or 5 organizations.
Instead of going on your adventure. They're schmoozing.
Yeah, instead of going on an adventure.
Well, I mean, but, like, so all of their downtime, they're like, all right, well, this is what I'm doing here, because I mean,
that could be stuff to do then in your downtime. Is schmoozing with these organizations.
You're right, but you've just built another tracking system and another and one score.
But
I say bother to 1 score.
I'm kind of on Nate's side of the fence, because eventually people are going to learn that if you're running around to all these other organizations, you know, you put another NPC in who is, you know, awarded great renown because he did the quest that you didn't do, and, you know, hail him as a major hero, you know, and it's like, oh crap, we could have done that.
I just missed out on 1,000 gold reward. I'm a dumbass.
Here's what I would actually offer up as kind of like the middle ground is, if you spend all your time trying to do that with other organizations, well, your renown with the 3 that you're already good with starts to fall, because you can't do all things.
Right.
You can't be all things.
I see it more of getting built up by people talking about you in the organization themselves. Like, if the Harpers are all linked together, and you just do something fantastic for one of them or save one of their lives, you're going to get a renown point from them because that person's going to report to his superiors, and they're going to know that some kind of force for good is in that section and what, you know, the descriptions and everything about them. So like in some kind of like linked network like that, that's how your renown score is increasing, even if it's across the sea, is because once you get to a certain level in renown, you're going to be talked about even over there through this organization's network. Or like a thieves guild. If you're known as a backstabber, so you have like negative renown, let's say, which isn't in here, but I say you can have it. So you have infamy as some kind of guy that doesn't really work well and play well with others. Well,
So in your job evaluation form, it's going to say it does not work well with others.
So like
well, there's going to be talk that, you know, hey, don't go on a gig with this guy.
See, I look at it as you could probably, you know, without too much effort, have like 3 different organizations that a character has influence with and is currently working towards. You know, let's take your character in my game. You know, you've got the Silver Hand and, you know, the town of Gryffindor are all things that you're working towards, and the Cult of the Blood, as Nate was calling it, you know, would, even though the game says no, don't go below 0. You know, I look at that as like, okay, well, you're tracking in that organization as well, you know, for anyone that might know who you are, because you're working contrary to their viewpoints. So the town holds you in high esteem because you're actively helping out the town. The guild
And I
holds
keep my Thieves Guild stuff on the down low.
and
Yeah.
you keep your thieves stuff on the down low, so you're tracking on that as well. Well, having good standing in the town is not going to in any way, shape, or form give you good standing within the Thieves Guild. So those two would have to be separate, even though they're in the same locale. So going with the having just one renown isn't going to work in those two situations, because in a lot of situations they're going to have, you know, counter agendas.
Yeah. Well, I mean, all that being said, just having static scores, you know, well, I mean, scores are dynamic in that they change, but the whole game mechanicking things to death, like, I would just use those as loose guidelines anyway.
And that's exactly what I'm doing. You know,
Yeah.
I have, you know, based on what's actually happened in the game, and what, you know, happens, you know, behind the scenes determines what's actually, you know, going on, you know, in these actually organizations, and how it's influencing what the characters can do. You know, so there's been a couple times that benefits have happened because, oh, well, people know who you are. The other times, you know, people are like, well, you know,
The wrong people know who we
the
are.
wrong people know who you are, so it's like, well, how can we manipulate? How can we do this? So,
Yeah.
that's
But I
the
mean,
way
a
look
lot
at it.
of this too, though, is just worked into your plot. Like the blood cult thing, like that was an oppositional force to begin with. Like that's plotted out to be that way. You know, like we're doing stuff
Yes.
against them, and like that's going to happen. The score thing was just like, well, I mean, it kind of fits that.
It's
but
a
what was
way
gonna
of
happen
actually-
Well, that being said, we're not actually using scores.
No, yeah.
But it just adds an interesting way to score things and add it into your game if you're tracking factions.
If you're a number
Yeah.
guy or a number gal and you want to, you know, plug this in, okay, you do this quest, this is going to get you 3 points for this particular faction, you know.
Or forget that. Like as a DM, you just might make notes and you may use this and not ever tell the players.
right.
That they have
That's
it run it.
probably what I would do.
You know what I
is
mean?
not
It's
let
just
anybody
as a
know what's
simple
going
way
on.
for you to not have to remember every single thing they did. You go to 53.
There's a tally,
Those
yeah.
people love them.
He must have did something.
I don't
guys,
remember the
somewhere.
past 2 years
Yeah.
that well of all the stuff
Yeah.
that's happened,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
they must have did something awesome.
And off the top of my head, I don't even know what the range of the scores are.
No, they go
0
in the
to something.
50s. They go pretty high.
Yeah, it goes up to at least 50.
So, but you know, my point is, like, it might just be a nice tracker for the DM, even if you have multiple organizations, because all you're doing is, you know, you're just making a note as you go, and then you might just have, you know, a spreadsheet set up with your players, and maybe it doesn't change that often anyway. And in your mind, you go, oh, you know, they get deals here, here, and here, or oh, wait a minute,
That Assassin's Guild really wants to kill them now.
yeah, they're worth a lot of money
Yeah.
because of this.
Yeah.
So like I said, it's an interesting optional rule, like all the rules in the DMG. If you think it'll add to your game, put it in there. If you think it'll add to your game, if you modify it when you put it in there. And, you know, if you see no value, don't use it.
That's right.
But you
That's
guys
right.
can let us know down in the comments below. Share, like, subscribe, all that good stuff.
You can hang out with nerdarchy.com and maybe get some renown in that way.
You can check us out on Twitter.
You can also join the conversation over on Reddit.
Until next time,
Stay nerdy.